Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. How is everybody doing today? This is your coach Beasley here with Photoshop in our raster imaging class. We are into lecture number 10. No, I'm sorry, lecture number 9. I'm going way ahead of my time. Camera raw and HDR. So, what is that? We're going to be talking about this raw format, basically with uh, higher end consumer level as well as professional level cameras. You have the ability to shoot in different modes, which means that when you capture the picture, you have the standard JPEG format that you will have on almost every camera. You got TIFF, which is a more preferred file extension because it captures and holds on to more information that's going to be better quality, higher resolution, higher size, file size, and all that sort of thing. And then you got our wonderful camera raw format. Now, that camera raw format, we'll talk about that this a little bit deeper, but it is giving you more information. Matter of fact, more information than actually Photoshop or any of your other electronic devices can actually deal with. And then it's up to that electronic program or that device on outputting, giving you what you need or you creating what you need from the raw data. So essentially, it's a raw data file that you're getting. Everybody has their own arguments about what is the better choice, camera raw, JPEG, or TIFF. That we're not here to discuss that particular thing. We're just going to talk about how Photoshop deals with these raw files, what you're going to get, and how it's going to go. So, a couple of things to just be mindful of, or points to be aware of. A camera raw file is kind of a digital negative. Contains all your information that's captured by that particular camera. Um, it's a non-destructive, meaning that it doesn't throw away information. So resolution, size, color information, you never lose it with a raw data file. You always have the ability to bring information back and take information away. So when you're in Photoshop and you're working with these raw files, you have the ability to manipulate what you want to see, and you're not throwing away or getting rid of stuff. Whereas, like, say, for instance, a JPEG file, that JPEG file format, when you save a file as a JPEG, you have a quality rating that you have to go with from all the way down to 1, all the way up to 10. And I'll try to demonstrate this to you before we get started into the raw file. But at that in that quality range, at 10, you're saving as much information as possible with that particular JPEG format, but you're still throwing away some of the quality of the picture. You're still throwing away some of the resolution of the picture to get to that particular quality level. If you go down to 1, you're getting rid of even more. And that could be a bad thing for future use because depending on what range that you save that quality to, you're stuck with just that information and the next time that you open that file. Camera raw file, on the other hand, you don't have that loss. You don't lose anything. Even though you save it as a raw file, when you open it up in Photoshop, you're going to say what your resolution is going to be, which will determine your file size and everything else. After you do that, you still keep the raw data information, which is always a good thing. Greater bit depth. Now, what does that mean? Greater bit depth means that you have a larger range of color that's going to be captured at the time the picture is taken. Versus if you take that same picture on a camera that only captures in JPEG, you have a shorter range of color that's going to be captured. So you get more dynamic pictures that come out. And that extended dynamic range just means you have a larger range of color in which you can adjust for color tone, for brightness, for contrast, for the actual color values and all that sort of stuff. And it makes it kind of an interesting thing to work with. But it's another step you have to take because you have to go in to a different interface for Camera Raw. It's not just a regular Photoshop interface. And you got to adjust for things, white balance, exposure control, and this presence setting. This is basically like texture, clarity, vibrance, and things like that in the picture that may be there at the time the picture is captured. You're trying to either bring that out or suppress it, one of the two. So you have to go through a completely different interface in order to get that camera raw file to come into Photoshop. And it's not difficult to do. It's just something that you're trying to make happen. And you're doing it because, again, this is an argument. Some people like this, some people don't. You can enhance the picture a lot better in the camera raw interface that comes up than you could do with the normal controls that you would have inside of Photoshop. So the different filters and everything that you would use to control sharpening, noise reduction, and any other things that you want to do to the picture, you could do it better in the camera raw format than you could in just Photoshop. And again, it's an argument because it's not true, but it's not a lie at the same time. Like it is true, there are greater controls you have. And those different controls you have for color tone and things like that, if you like using that interface, go with that. But like we did last week, where we were going through the color adjustment filters, if you like using those color adjustment filters, the layer adjustment filter, the adjustment layers, and all the other stuff that we were doing yesterday, I mean last week, if you like doing that, go with that. It's not that it's better. It's just it's another option. That's really how you have to treat it, because there are arguments and there are times where you may want to go with one version versus another of doing the same type of adjustments. That's all it is to it. And we'll look at it and you'll see what I'm talking about. Now, after we talk about the camera raw filter and how you get through that, takes a little bit of time, but we'll get through it. Then we're going to get in talking about HDR. Now, HDR is a little easier to deal with, and it's a little easier to talk about. It's called high dynamic range photography. It's basically, those of you that taken the photography class, you already know how to do this. At least you should. Those who haven't yet, if you got an iPhone, and I think Android cameras, the higher end ones like the Pixels, can do this too. You could shoot in HDR. All right. Now, what is that doing? It's taking at least 3 shots at different exposure levels. So your exposure level is how much light is coming through that photo sensor. So you have the normal exposure, which is taking the picture normally. Then you have the ability to go up a couple of exposure levels to get a brighter picture. So the bright highlights are going to get really blown out, but those darker shadow areas, you'll see more details in those. And then you get a lower um, exposure. So this way, the darker areas get completely dark and it's hard to see, but the brighter areas, you get more details because they're not so blown out. And then the computer within that camera will merge those 3 types of pictures together to give you that HDR image. Photoshop, you could take those 3 separate exposures and use them in conjunction with each other to create that HDR look, that high dynamic range look, and you get a real overexposed kind of look. It's kind of fun. Um, because you can have an overexposure in one area, an underexposure in another area of the same picture, and you can bring out a lot more detail than you normally would. Like the sample is like this picture right here that's sitting right here in my presentation. This photo wasn't taken this way. It didn't look like this when the shot was taken, but um, to get the details in the clouds, the details in the city back behind them, and especially the details in the camera person here, where you can almost see this texture of his skin and that sort of thing. That is that HDR photography. Now, this picture was probably shot using HDR technique of the at least 3 shots. You can do 5. I got a couple of examples that I can show you about how this can kind of work. It's cool to do. It's a thing. It got kind of popular, but then it got way overblown, meaning that too many people were using it for too many things and not just using it as like an enhancement. They were just using it for everything, and it just doesn't work for everything. But there's a way in which you could shoot for HDR. It involves what they call bracketing. It's basically bracketing it, to keep it simple, is the exposure settings and the exposure and capture settings. You start with 1 to get the perfect exposure like you want. Then you go up a couple of 1 or 2 exposure levels up, 1 or 2 exposure levels up again, and then the same thing going the reverse, going down. It's not difficult to do. It's just a matter of doing it. Some cameras, professional level cameras, your phone cameras and things can do it for you automatic, but sometimes the automatic is not as good as if you have the ability to control it yourself. So that's just how it kind of works through. Okay. Um, there's this thing called Merge to HDR Pro that we'll take a look at that's inside of Photoshop. It allows you to get the different exposures, adjust for ghost removal. So if you have like smoke, fire, water, wind, and I don't think I have that file anymore where I could show that to you. You can get rid of the little ghost effects that'll happen. Basically, things that move when you're taking these multiple exposure shots, you're not going to get the same picture every time. So the ghosts are those parts of the pixels that do not match in all the pictures. You're trying to get rid of those for those moving things so it doesn't look weird. You don't have a little ghost effect happening. Tone mapping is basically just trying to get the tone of the image the way you want. Again, underexposure in one spot, overexposure in another area, and that sort of thing to get what you're looking for. And it's again kind of cool. When you're done, everything becomes merged together as one final file there in Photoshop. So these are the things that you'll be able to adjust with the HDR Pro filter that's there. Edge glow, which is manage local contrast for more of a natural look, to get kind of like the glowing skin or to tone down the added reflection of light from the picture, adjusting overall tonal balance with tonal width, detail enhancements, of course, and then glowing halos basically around the different edges of when the color changes. Again, from overexposure, you'll get these real big glowing halo effects that'll happen. If you want to remove them, you can remove them. If you want to enhance them to make them stand out more, you can do that too. Um, Local adjustments, color enhancements, output prep. Yeah, we just talked about those things. Um, we talked about this. The camera. I don't know why this is out of order. The camera raw versus the JPEG differences there. Just re-emphasizing what I talked about already. The raw files, like I said, is unprocessed data. It's just raw data, ones and zeros that you get. You have a greater editing flexibility, meaning you can use that camera raw file for almost any type of output. It is a huge file size, so a lot of photographers, some photographers don't like using the camera raw format because their memory cards, they don't have a lot of them and they don't have a lot of space. So to save. So when you have to do a longer photo shoot, camera raw files, you're going to eat up a lot of space. So that becomes a problem. The JPEG format is processed already. It's compressed immediately as soon as a picture is taken. So you have a limited range for editing and for different output purposes. And then, of course, you got a smaller file size because of the nature of the JPEG file, or the TIFF file is bigger than a JPEG file would be, but it's not as processed, it's not as compressed, and you have a larger range. It's kind of the TIFF file format is kind of in between the JPEG and the RAW. It's kind of like the happy middle, and that's what some photographers, if they can shoot in the TIFF format, they'll prefer that over the JPEG, and they'll prefer that over the RAW because you get kind of a smaller file size to be able to shoot more pictures, but then you still don't have as much of a flexibility and that sort of thing. But they'll live with it. Um, Best practices for HDR. See that again? That one slide was out of context order. Using a tripod if you're going to be shooting yourself, which is going to keep everything sturdy and steady, and that way you don't have to touch the thing. You don't have to touch the camera when you're taking the shot if you have a remote. That makes it even better. Avoid over processing for realistic results. This is the main thing right here. Uh, Avoid over processing, and you'll see what I'm talking about. I'll show you a couple of examples, and we'll do it to show you what over processing will look like. And sometimes it's cool. It's a novel thing that looks neat, but again, don't do it too much because what are we using the picture for? That's where you make your decision. I think that's it. Yeah, that's all. Yep. All right, so that's it when it comes to this part of our presentation. So I can get rid of this. And we're going to get into Photoshop and looking at different things. Now, let's first talk about these camera raw files and specifically talking about something that you need to make sure that you do. Camera raw files. What I'm doing is I'm showing you on our good old internet. If you go and Google camera raw files, some links that you should take a look at. I don't see what I'm looking for. Hold on. Camera raw file formats. Is this the one? That is not the one. I'm looking for a particular um, link. Here we go. This is the one I was looking for. All right, so I'll post these into Blackboard later on today, so that way you'll have them when I put up these videos. But camera raw, as I mentioned before, it is a raw data file. The problem that comes with camera raw files is every manufacturer of the camera, their raw file format is different. Give you an example. With Apple, they have this HEIF format, which is a high efficiency file format that's built into the camera. And if you're using the Photos app only, that is going to give you kind of the best output image that Apple can give you. But they also have their camera raw format that you can shoot in too. If you go into your settings for your camera, you can change it to that format. So this way, that raw format becomes a little more universal that would work in other apps besides the Photos app for editing, for passing on to somebody else, or anything like that. That's what I have for my camera. So my iPhone, I got like two of them. One of them I use strictly as a camera, where I'm shooting video for my football team or whatever, and I'm also shooting still pictures. I shoot in that raw format because it's more universal to be able to capture and to be able to give out or send out to people if I need to, or at least bring into Photoshop and programs like that that I can edit. So every camera body that's manufactured has different file formats for their camera raw format. This link here, this page shows you the different formats that are out there. There are a ton of them. And that is a problem because every time the camera changes its model number, its serial number, a new version comes out of a camera from a different manufacturer, you're going to get a different file format that comes out. Now, are they all good? Well, that's an argument because depending on the company, depends on how good they make that format, and that's how good they make their camera. So it's kind of up in the air which ones are better than others. Now, common ones, the ones that you tend to get the most of from photographers. DNG, we'll talk about this one because this is very important for that format. That's the one that you should get all the time. CR2, which stands for Camera Raw version 2. NEF, which is I think Nikon's version. Yeah, comes from Nikon. ARW is another one. ARW, I forget who has that one. It's listed on here. ARW from Sony. That's a Sony brand. Um, but there's others that are out there, and CR2 is from Canon. Canon RAW. I said camera RAW. I meant to say Canon RAW format. But those are coming from those major brands. Not um, that's a standard. It's just those are the major brands that most of our professional photographers would use. So that's the format that you're going to get. Now, Adobe has. Okay, so this link is just a write-up from Adobe about Camera Raw. That is not the one that I wanted to show you. Uh, uh, Adobe DNG converter. Adobe DNG converter. That's what I was looking for. Adobe has, I'm going to give you this link. Adobe has, for all these different camera raw formats, they have this thing, which is called a DNG converter. Now, Adobe, I don't know if they created the DNG file format or they just decided to adopt that format. But the DNG format is digital negative. That's what it's kind of the general term for it. This is an app that you download on your computer, Mac or Windows. And what you do is you take a bunch of these digital negative, these camera raw files that you get, and convert them over to that DNG format. Now, why? In the future, 5, 10 years down the line, a lot of the camera bodies that we have now will be obsolete. So that means that camera raw format that camera is attached to is not going to be available for translation and for processing. So, right now, you would take your camera raw files and all these different file formats and the ones that's going to come out in the future, and you convert it to this DNG file. Because what this DNG file does, it's kind of like a zip file. A zip file will take all the files that you got, collect them together, and compress them all into a zip file. It doesn't damage them. It doesn't degrade them at all. It's just a container. That's how a zip file works. It's just a container that holds these things in a smaller file size so you can transport it and send it to somebody else. So a DNG file kind of works the same. It takes the raw data file plus the conversion information. So it's a thing called a codec. It's just the information that says how do you convert this raw file into something that's visible, into something, these ones and zeros that make up this raw data file. How do you convert that into something that Photoshop or some other future program can actually read and look at? So it packages all that together. So a DNG file is just a package of the raw file plus this codec to make sure that everything can be seen, processed, looked at in the future. So Adobe created this converter. You take a folder that has all of your camera raw files, however you get them, and you select that folder. You choose where you want to save these DNG files in the same folder, or maybe it's a different folder. And then you select like a naming convention if you want to. It'll put DNG as the new file extension for all the files, and then you tell it to go, and it will convert, and it'll just take whatever time that takes in order to convert everything over. When it's done, when it's done and finished, you'll have all of their DNG files in that version of Camera Raw. You'll have all of your Camera Raw files converted over to DNG and ready for you to use, not just in Photoshop, but mainly in Photoshop, whatever the future version of Photoshop will be. So you want to make sure that you get that, hold on to that, and create that. So this way, now you can archive files as the DNG files, and not necessarily as your standard camera raw files. You can, once you do that DNG conversion, you can get rid of the camera raw files if you want to. You don't shouldn't, but you can. Now what happens? Well, opening a regular picture in Photoshop is simply just, kind of file to open. You do your standard kind of file to open. It allows you to go and find a picture. And let's go to our exercise files. That's inside of, I can't find things today. It's kind of par for the course. Lectures, lecture 9. Go into our class files. So I'm going to go to this raw filter. Well, let me open this JPEG file first. So if I do this regular JPEG file and open it up, it'll open, it'll show me the picture. It's ready to go. I can start using it, right? If I go to image and go to image size, it will show me the physical size of this image and its resolution. And I can change this from pixels to inches to see how big this would print. 15 by 18 inches in size. That's how big this thing is. That's how big it'll print out at, and at the resolution of 72 pixel per inch. Now, If you remember anything that I've been showing you, 72 pixel per inch is way too low for nowadays for the internet, much less for printing. If I wanted to print this resolution number has to get up to at least 150. And if I really wanted it for today's internet to display properly without loss of quality at whatever size I need to output it to, I probably need to get this resolution to jump up to around 96 if I can. By right now, the standard, I can't do that. That's a difficult thing to do. Little side note, there is a way to make that happen, and I'll show you it right now. Most pictures you get off the internet, when you go and save the picture, you right click, save picture as type of thing. The resolution is going to be 72 or 96 or somewhere around there. And the physical size of it in pixels will be kind of like this. It'll be kind of big, a large number. Hopefully, it's a number bigger than this. It's like around 3,000. Because if you could find one where the width and the height is around the 3,000 range or more, and that resolution at 72, it's going to be a better benefit because there is a trick you could do here in this image size window where you can change the physical size of this so it prints smaller, but it has a larger resolution. Okay. And this is only for using it to print. This is not for resizing for anything else. So if you're dealing something, you got a picture, you want to use it for printing, you need to get it to that resolution of 150 or better, but but it can print at a smaller size. Then you could possibly do this. So here's how this works. I'm going to convert this over to inches so you can see again in inches. This is how big it prints. 15 inches by 18 inches. That's a pretty big picture. Um, Resolution's at 72, so the quality is not going to be that big. It's going to look fuzzier than it does right now. If I take this resample option here and I uncheck this, look what happens. The width, the height, and the resolution are linked together now. Now, what is this resample? What resample does is that if I change the size of this by either changing the resolution or changing the width and height, the computer does a little bit of its own math to try to figure out how to rearrange the pixel information to get the same picture at its new size or at its new resolution. It's not perfect. It's it does its better job. It does a better job when you're trying to reduce, meaning you're making things smaller versus enlarging or trying to make it bigger. Um, the math works. It just does not work perfect all the time. So what does that mean? That means if I keep resample on, I can hit that drop down where it says automatic there and pick a different output type to try to change the math a little bit. Um, the one that I always use is this bicubic sharper because I'm always taking bigger pictures and making them smaller. So if I'm going smaller in size, it adds a little sharpening to try to make the details stand out at that smaller size, then so it looks just as good as it did when it was bigger. Um, these others are kind of hit and miss. Like preserved details, if I was trying to make this picture bigger, where it covers a larger area, then it does a little bit of work to try to keep the details correct, like the texture in the hair, the skin, that sort of stuff. Um, and there's a 2.0 version of it, which I do not familiar with how well or good or bad that it would work. Um, these other ones where it says bilinear, nearest neighbor, and bicubic, these were the original ones that were terrible. Um, where bicubic was the one that you had to use because that was the only thing that looked good. And then bicubic sharper came out, which tend to make it look better, especially when you're going smaller. This bicubic smoother versus this preserved details, do these work better? Probably. If you're not sure, automatic is probably going to be your best choice to go with if you're not well versed in, and you don't want to experiment. If you got time to experiment, make take a picture, make it, take a picture, make a duplicate of it, make it smaller through this using one of these different choices, and then make it larger using one of these different choices. See what you get quality wise. The way you would do it, to try to show you, if I made it smaller, so I make the height smaller That makes the width smaller, see, keeping the same resolution, keeping this to automatic right now, and I hit OK. You can see what I get. And then if I zoom in at 100% to this, so I got it at 100% zoom, I can see what it looks like because I made it smaller. Doesn't look that bad. Let me undo that. Image size, keeping it to automatic. Let's say I want to make it bigger. Let's say I want to make it 30 inches in the height. So that makes it so much bigger. Now, again, zooming at 100%, I can start to tell if you look around the hair, look at the skin texture, look at the details, like in the lips and the legs and on her chest, and in the even in the earrings and stuff. Those details are starting to get lost. They're you get this thing called artifacting that happens where the details of those pixels spreading out or compressing down, they're starting to suffer. Because this file was a JPEG from the beginning, it already had a compression on it. So now that compression information that was there is really starting to come out now, and it's starting to look bad. And that's a bad thing. You don't like that. You don't want that because it just looks bad overall. The picture looked all right. This is 100%. I undid it, so this is what it looks like regular coming out the box at 100%. And it will look worse as I zoom in. You start seeing all the flaws, but that's because I'm zooming in on it. Getting larger than 100%. But that's what you have to do as a test. You do the image size, you check it out at its new size with that interpolation turned on with the resample choice, and you see what you get. Now, if I uncheck the resample and I change the resolution or I change the width or the height, they're all linked together, so now it works kind of on a seesaw thing. Watch this. If I go larger on the width or the height, the resolution is going to reduce. If I find out that my resolution needs to be 175, you'll see the size is going to reduce. So now it's 6 inches by 7 inches that it prints out at. So if I wanted to see, okay, I need this to be a 4 by 6, so 6 inches for the height. So I set the height to be 6 inches. The width is at 4.8, so that's close enough to 4 inches. And now the resolution is at 225, much larger than what I need to print it out. That's the magic of that resample being turned off. And then what also happens when I hit OK, picture don't change. Let me zoom this back to 100% zoom. This is at 100%. The picture looks the same, even though the physical size of this thing has changed. It prints at a smaller size, but it has a larger resolution to it because what they say, the density, the pixels haven't been removed or added. They just change the information of what's in the pixels, what's inside of each pixel. It's a weird thing. It's one of those Photoshop magic things, but it's actually kind of cool. So I could take a picture off the internet, because that's where I got this picture from. Take this picture off the internet, right click, save picture as, or you get pictures from a client and they're pictures that they use for, their web presence or whatever. Now they want to print that picture in a flyer or something like that. You'll probably have to do this little trick. You'll have to go to image size. You'll uncheck resample. You'll find out from the print shop that printing the flyer, what's the resolution the pictures need to be. You'll set it to that resolution and you can see how big you'll be able to print it at, that number. And hopefully that's the size or smaller than what you need. And you go from there. That's the trick. Now, camera raw files. You don't have to worry about a lot of this because with camera raw files, there is no resolution from the beginning. There is no physical size from the beginning. Heck, there's not even a file format besides the raw file that you'll have from the start. So that's what makes these camera raw files a cooler aspect, a cooler thing to be able to use. Now, what happens is this. When you get a camera raw file, and I got in this folder called raw filter here, that's in the exercise files. I got two files. One's called high pass, and the other one's called double process. Both of these are camera raw files. One of them's a DNG file already. It's been converted. The other one is just a CR2 file. But both of them, you're going to go through the same thing. I'm trying to see if I can preview one of these, and it's not opening in the preview. That's fine. I'm going to open the high pass one because it kind of doesn't matter which one I decide I want to open because both of them are going to do the same thing. When I choose to open it, got to give it a second. Okay, my splash screen didn't come up. All right, so this is the camera raw filter. If you have not used the camera raw filter at all, or it recently updated, you'll get a splash screen that I was expecting to pop up that lets you know, hey, welcome to this new version of camera raw. So you'll see that first. It'll tell you new features or whatever. You can hit OK to get out of that. When you get to this camera raw filter, I always like to put this thing, expand it out so that way it's pretty much full screen mode. So that way I don't see anything else behind it to work with it. When you get a camera raw file and you open it up in this camera raw filter, a couple of things that you're going to be able to do. Um, First thing, bottom of the screen. At the very bottom of the screen, at the bottom of the screen, you'll see a little thumbnail of the picture. This is just in case you open more than one camera raw file. Um, you'll be able to go back and forth between them. If you use Lightroom, and I think I explained this before in a previous lecture, Lightroom is a stripped down version of Photoshop. It is essentially this camera raw filter along with Adobe Bridge kind of put together with some of the tools and features you have inside of Photoshop. It is made for photographers to go through and do some simple editing to their images, add in the metadata information they need before they pass it over to their client. It is not doing the heavy work that you can do inside of Photoshop to make a full composite of pictures as such. Now, saying that because this camera raw filter that you're about to look at is going to be the interface you have inside of Lightroom when it comes to looking at a picture. So this film strip, as they call it down here at the bottom, in Lightroom, you will see all the different pictures that you have in one roll, as they call it, or basically one group of pictures. You'll see all the individual pictures, so you can click between them to set the different options that you got over here on the side for all of them. Whether you want to select them together as a group or whether you want to select each one individually. So in this camera raw filter, they kind of put this same film strip down here in case you decide to choose more than one camera raw file to open at the same time. It'll show them all down here at the bottom for you if you want to look at them. And then you have this little set of buttons that'll show up on top of the picture to kind of give you some different settings. Like the main one is this copy edit settings here. So what you'd be able to do is these settings that I'm going to go through over here on the right-hand side of the screen, after you set it for this picture, I can copy them. So this way, the other pictures I have here, I can paste those same settings on those other pictures. Same photo shoot, same session, same time, same set of pictures. You do one picture, set that like you want, and then you can apply those same settings to all the pictures and the same photo shoot session. So you don't have to go one at a time and do it. That's what that's for. That's the main thing. All right. So with that being done, let's talk about the other thing. So you got your zoom percentage down here where you have the ability to fit everything on the screen, which is the best choice, but you also can zoom at 100% of the picture, and then if you want to pan around, you can hold down your space bar. You can click and drag around to kind of see the textures of her skin tone and see if there's any artifacting, which there of course is not going to be, but you could check to see if there's any discoloration. You see how this is kind of fuzzy right here along her shoulder because of focal length. Anybody that knows anything camera work, this makes any sense. It's basically focusing on one thing is going to blur out something else. To make things sharp in one spot, you're going to blur other things. So this is further back in the background with her hair, so that's going to be a little fuzzier than her foreground there. So you could do that. You also have the same zoom in and out controls with the keyboard shortcuts as you do inside of Photoshop. So holding down the controller command key with plus and minus for zooming in and out, hitting control 0 for fit on screen. Command option and 0 is the 100% zoom controls. You got those same keyboard shortcut controls, as you do elsewhere. Next to that, you have these buttons here for, turning on and off the film strip mode. So if that film strip mode, you don't need to see it, there's a button there to turn it on and off. There is oh, you could sort through the things in the film strip by capture data, file name, star rating, that sort of thing. And then you got other filters that you can go with, for this film strip view down here at the bottom. Again, this film strip is not necessary. It's not really important, but it is something that's there. The star rating. Inside of Bridge, you have this, and then here inside of Camera Raw, you have these little stars for saying, hey, I like this picture, or this is more important of a picture than, say, some other picture. So you can give it a star rating if you want to. It's the same thing in what you have there in Photoshop. I mean, inside of Adobe Bridge. Um, Image will be moved to trash. No, I do not want to do that. I clicked that trash can there because that was a new thing. I was like, oh, that's not what I want that for. So you could play with that star rating if you want to. You basically click on the stars to turn on the star rating, click on the same star to turn it off as you need to. Now, over here to the right, the last two things here, these are kind of cool because you can go through before and after results. So after you set up your different options on the picture, you can click on these buttons down here to go and see your different kind of before and after. You can have it as little toggle buttons to for the before and after, or you got different versions of it that you can kind of run through. Just press and hold onto this button here, and you can see you got different views that you can go for. And it's kind of cool with that because you can see what you have and have not created. All right. Just trying to see before I get started. Yeah, let's go through these different settings here. So you have all these different settings. To keep it simple in your brain, with all these different settings that I'm about to go through, you don't need to use them all. Okay. You could just pick one of these setting groups and use just that. And you can go through and get a lot of results that are good. But I'm going to show you all of them so that way you know that you have these different options here. Um, and then I'm going to try to show you if I can remember, because sometimes I don't remember, how to turn these settings off. Because as you go through them and start tinkering around, they keep adding and adding to the picture. And sometimes you don't want that to be added, so you have to do things to kind of turn it off. You see these little eyeballs next to each one of these different groups. These eyeballs allow you to turn on that particular setting and use it. So when you hit the drop down arrow next to the name and start moving these different sliders around or setting the particular options in that section, that eyeball is going to light up. And you can press and hold onto the eyeball to temporarily turn it off to kind of see before and after. But I'm trying to remember right now, and I cannot remember how to turn it completely off. It'll come through my brain as I go through this. So bear with me if I forget. I'll remember. If you hear a pause, it's my brain trying to sort through the information to try to remember. All right, so first section up here at the top is the histogram. You'll have this on a camera. It shows you where the color is being applied from the shadows, with the shadows and the blacks all the way to the left, going to all the highlights and the whites all the way to the right. Now, everything is sectioned off, so as you hover over different sections, you see different areas that you can adjust for. Now, this is, I guess it could be kind of fun, but it can also be very complicated because what you're doing is you're pushing and pulling the color information in this picture to be applied to these different areas, from the midtones to the blacks and the shadows. So blacks is everything that's absolutely black. So all the darkest parts of the picture, like this deep shadow area, like underneath her chin or right here by her temple. Those areas are like in her eyes are completely black, but then you got the shadows that which are darker areas, but they're not just completely 100% black. The opposite. You have your highlights, which are your lighter areas, your brighter areas, and then you have the whites, like the absolute white area within the pictures that you can adjust for. And essentially, it's a click and drag. So I can click and drag this histogram around within these particular ranges and see how it affects everything, and it affects your entire picture and the distribution of the color. Now, the problem that comes about is oversaturation when you go way too high. If you see you got these little marks that's up in the top left and right corners, if they stay black, you're within the range of not overexposure. But as soon as it starts, that little mark starts changing color, the color of the mark is telling you that that particular range is getting clipped. So blue, green, red. All right. If it turns white, that means all that range, red, green, and blue, is being oversaturated and you're clipping or oversaturating the colors. So you want to either back off, or if it's the desired look you want, just understand that you are oversaturating in a particular area. So that way you can kind of adjust the different color values according to what you want and get the over or underexposed picture that you're wanting to get with the color distribution. That's what it's for. Is it good? Subjective. Is it bad? Again, subjective. It's what you want it to be. That's all it comes into. Now, um, at any time that you want to reset everything that you've done, you do something weird, you don't like it, you want to start over from scratch. You can hold down your Alt key or your Option key, and at the bottom of your screen here to the right, what is the cancel button will become a reset button. So you can reset this back to its original state. So from the time you opened it, it'll go back to that original state, no matter what you do or how far you go with everything. So that's one thing you do. Hold down your Alt or Option key, your cancel button becomes a reset because this is a filter, just like any of the other filters in Photoshop. Now, right here where it says Edit, up here at the top, you have three buttons. You got Auto, you got B&W, and you got HDR. Auto is an auto adjustment, meaning you're letting the computer figure out what the best balance of color is and the best look and clarity and that sort of thing, that it deems that it's the best. You could turn that on to see if you like it, and if you don't like it, you could turn it off or reset it, to get back. B&W is black and white. That's turning your picture black and white and giving you the best representation there. Again, it's a one-click thing. You can look at it, see if you like it. Again, if you don't like it, you can turn it off. HDR is your HDR look, and this is going to be an HDR look that's going to be reasonable based on the information that's there. What I mean by reasonable, it's going to give you the HDR range. It's going to give you in the histogram at the top the ability to go further and push further with your different HDR ranges. It gives you kind of two of them or three or four. It depends on the picture. Where the initial thing is going to give you what the HDR should look like on a portrait shot, on a landscape shot, whatever. Again, based on the information that's there. Then you can push further. So you can use the histogram at the top there to push the envelope, one direction or another and go a little further in the process of giving you your dynamic range image. And again, it's a choice. And again, you can turn it on or turn it off, as you see that you like it, don't like it. And again, you can always reset it to kind of start over. Now, those are kind of the one-hit wonders right there at Edit, where you just clicking on the button, seeing what happens. You can play with the histogram at the top, and see what goes along. Those kind of work together. Now, if you don't like that or you want to enhance even further, you have this profile here. Now, the profile is going to start off with a shorter list than what I got. These are built-in settings. So basically, all these settings that are underneath here, these different sections, they're all created as a profile and combination that people like you and me have created, given it to Adobe. Adobe adds it to this list, and it uses its own features to make the adjustment. Now, this one that I just clicked on is like the AI version, where you're letting the AI tools that are here within Photoshop do its thing. It has to update apparently, and it's just going to take a little bit of time. Hopefully it doesn't just like crash, because sometimes that can happen. Even on a Mac, your computer will crash on you. Your program will crash on you nowadays. Come on. I don't want to hit the stop button, but I may have to do that because it may be stuck right now. Can I make it stop? Usually when things like this happen, you get like the beach ball of death, or you get like the hourglass on the Windows thing, and it just sits there for a little bit, kind of hangs up. You usually have to, if you there's a stop or cancel button, usually you may be able to click on that and that'll stop everything. If that doesn't work, yeah, that's fine. If that doesn't work, then you may have to close the program, like quit out of the program, or do control alt delete, that sort of thing, to get out of the program and start all over again. But like this adaptive color profile was what that AI was trying to update. It's basically letting Photoshop figure out what needs to be done. But then you got these others that are already kind of preset, pre-made profiles. Now, let me show you how to get to those profiles. Next to the drop down, you have this button here that looks like a little square with a little squares with magnifying glass. You click onto that, it lets you browse through the different profiles, and you have a bunch of them that are in different categories, and you just hit the drop down to find the category, click on that particular profile. Some of them you could just hover over and you'll see it apply to your picture. If you like that profile and you want to use it, and possibly use it in the future, and I think I just made my thing go nuts again. Mm-hmm. Because I clicked on this adaptive black and white, and I don't see anything happening. It's just giving me the beach ball. Can't hit escape. That doesn't work. I may have to force quit out of this, and start up Photoshop again. Then open that camera raw file again and not choose that adaptive option again. Do, 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 do. I'm waiting on Photoshop to decide it wants to open. Usually with Photoshop, especially Illustrator 2, if you have to force quit or do that Control Alt Delete to quit out of it, it has to go through its own protocol. So what it's trying to do right now is not only open itself, but also take a look at what was the reason that it got shut down. It'll try to send like an error message out to Adobe. It may ask you like, "Hey, do you want to send this out?" Yeah, you can go ahead and do that, and then it'll try to open the last file that was open at the time. Sometimes that delays it as well, and speed of your computer. My computer here that I got is getting kind of old. I think it's a 2019, or maybe older than that. I can't remember. Um, Version of a Mac, so it gets kind of goofy at times. Let's see. Let's try to open this again. Still thinking. Who's good do we can too. Oh, come on. Open. Go back to lectures. Go back to lecture 9. Let's go back into our class files. Raw filter and high pass. And let it think through and open in the camera raw filter. Expand you out so I can see. Well, I didn't want to go full screen like that, but I guess that works. Don't need the film strip. Let's get rid of the film strip like I did before. Let's go back to the profiles and not click on any of that adaptive color one, that adaptive thing there. So as I was saying, if I hover over the profile, it will adjust the color, so I can see what it looks like. If I click on the profile, some of the profiles, these don't have it. Let's find another one. Let's go under modern, click on one of these. Some of the profiles, when you click on them, will have an amount slider that you can slide the amount of that profile, so you can have it, come on stronger or, not as strong, for the adjustment. If you really like that profile, there is a little star in the top right hand corner of the profiles that you can click onto to make it a favorite. So this way, that drop down menu that I had with the profiles, it would be added to that list. So that way I can pick from that later on a different picture or the same picture and kind of go about the different adjustments. So these different profiles, again, made by different people and just added into here. There is a way, and that's beyond the scope of this class here. There is a way to make your own profile off of your own settings that you create, but I do not remember right offhand how to make them. So that way they're yeah, I don't remember offhand how to actually make your own profile. I know you can import profiles. So like if you have profiles that you have created in Adobe Lightroom, you can import those profiles here and have them available. If you go online and you look up Camera Raw profiles, you could probably find some that are free and others that you could pay for, and you can import them. You can just go to the little three dots up there and tell it to import. Uh, and there is a way to make your own profile here, and I just don't remember how to do it offhand. Now, if I hit that back button, it takes me back to where I can choose the profiles with the drop down menu. And again, if I pick a profile, I will have an amount that I can, choose how much I want to use of that particular profile. So again, quickly, fast, get the job done. This works great. Now let's get complicated. So all of these other categories, light, color, effects, curve, color mixer, and all the rest of these are different profile or different additions to the profile, to the edit, to the histogram that you do up here. You can add on to it by putting more stuff in here, or not even worry about that stuff above these settings and just go through each one of these individual categories, either one only or go through each one of them and apply your own custom settings to get exactly what you want. So I reset this. And I'm just going to go through each one of these and try to explain the basics of what you get. So here in light, you have exposure, contrast, highlight, shadows, and the black and whites, where you can adjust for the light value within the picture. So you can under or overexpose. And then even with that, you can increase, decrease contrast in the picture, play around with how dark the shadows are going to get, how bright the highlights are going to get. And just by your adjustment, you can make some interesting results, you know. And again, there is no playbook like you have to do it this way. It's just the way that it gets done. And again, with the eyeball there, I can turn on and turn off the effect temporarily, but to completely, there's no way to complete that I remember to completely turn it off that I can remember right now. And I'm going to figure it out. I just can't remember right now what it is. Because there is a way to do it. Oh, there it is. Option bar, option key. So if you hold down your Alt or Option key, you'll see where it says reset. It just tell you reset light. Huh, that's what it is. And I can turn it off. So if you make these adjustments and you don't like it, you can just reset it like that. That's how you go about doing it. Color. This is where you could do things like white balance. White balance is basically the color and exposure levels of the camera or any other type of situation scenario that they give you here. So you have as shot, which means this is the white balance or the balance of color and light as the picture was taken. You can do an auto, which is kind of like the auto choice that's up there. It kind of gives you an automatic white balance of temperature, tint, vibrance, and saturation. That's, light value and color that you're getting. You have daylight, you have cloudy day, you have shade, you have fluorescent lights, tungsten lights, a regular flash, and then custom is like you moving these sliders around. So now the sliders down here, instead of going with this white balance up there and choosing something out of there, You can move the temperature, and the temperature is going to give you warmer colors, meaning it goes towards red, cooler color, so it goes towards blue. You have a tint, which goes more towards magenta in one direction and goes more towards green in the other direction, the opposite colors. With that, you have a vibrance and saturation, which vibrance is increasing the saturation or the color value subtly, whereas saturation is a little more dramatic with that. For me, sometimes, again, this is just a stylistic thing that I like to do. I'll turn the saturation down and turn the vibrance up. I just like the color distribution of that. If I turn that vibrance all the way up and then I can play with the saturation value, to try to get it where there's color, but it's not an oversaturation or over balance of color. That's what I like to do. That's just what I like to see. Um, so you'll come up with your own signature on how you like to do that one. And I'm resetting this on each one just so you can see what it looks like by itself with that one setting. Effects, this is like clarity of the picture, graininess of the picture, and things like that. So you have a texture and clarity. They kind of work together where you can increase texture to kind of bring out like skin tone and skin textures. If you look at her face there, it's kind of sharpening the picture with the texture. You can either sharpen it or blur it, and you can see how the skin texture is coming out, more and more as you increase. Clarity is another version of sharpening where you're increasing the clarity of the picture, which really is taking the blurriness that's in the background and kind of changing the focal length so that way it's a little clearer. Texture and clarity together is your full sharpening effect. So it's kind of separating the normal sharpening effect and kind of giving you a little greater control about how you want to sharpen it. All right. And this also blends into the HDR thing. The idea of the HDR, this is one example of it where you're increasing the high dynamic range so much that you bring out a lot of the texture of the skin. That also could be a bad thing because you could make this person look really terrible. Or you could do the glamour shots thing. If anybody remembers the old school glamour shots, it would look sort of like this, where they would on purpose blur the textures out to make you look younger and make you look, sexier and have a nice little glow to you because that made you look better, when the pictures were taken with glamour shots. If you don't know what glamour shots is, if you've ever been to J.C. Penney, Sears, or any photo studio to do portrait shots with you and the family, or you've seen those weird pictures, of people doing weird poses, dressed alike and all that. That used to be the trend of what we did back in the 80s and 90s. You had the family pictures or the school pictures. And then Glamour Shots was a company that did that same concept for people that wanted to make those sexy shots, those pictures that look good and you wanted to give it to your significant other or somebody that you admired and you wanted to attract them. So you did this kind of thing. It's terrible, but it is something that's there. Dehazing. This doesn't work really well on, like photos because you see everything just goes completely dark on an actual photo of a person. But what dehaze is supposed to do, let me reset this. What dehaze is supposed to do on a picture that has mist, fog, smoke, water droplets and water vapor, like the mist and the fog. It will dehaze it or take the haziness out of it and bring that, either add on to the haziness or take it out so you can see the details in the picture. And I don't have a good picture to show you of that, but that's what dehaze is for. Grain. Digital cameras don't have film grain anymore. What film grain is basically old film cameras used to have, in the film itself, it used to have these little bumps and dots in them to help with detail and quality of the picture. So a higher end film grain would be smaller little dots, but you could still see the details, whereas a lower grain would be, bigger dots and that sort of thing. So if you wanted the film grain in a digital camera, you have to simulate it like this, and that graininess could be, what you want. Digitally, you got digital haze or digital graininess, and that's what I'm creating here with this. And so I can lower it so that way I have a smoother looking picture without the grain. but I can add the graininess in there because, I want to have that retro picture look. Some of these settings, like the vignettes and the grain, have a little drop down where you can have added adjustments to things like the grain. So that way you can, have the graininess how you want to, but also adjust like the size and such too. All right. Let me reset that. And let me show you, let me close the grain one and let me show you the vignette. Now, the idea of vignettes is to put this darkening around the edges or lightening around the edges to give you this vignette look. Everybody kind of loves this with portrait shots. So you can adjust to choose how much of that vignetting that you want to have. And it's kind of neat, nice and neat. The extra setting is going to go with where the middle point of that vignetting, how much it takes up, its roundness of the vignetting. So you can have a stylistic thing along with the feathering amount. So you can have like an actual frame, or you can have it be real fuzzy around the edges of that vignette. And it's how you decide you want to play with it, because, you know, it could be very interesting and fun, especially with portrait shots, to be able to play with the vignetting and not do the standard, elliptical circle. So that's what that one's for. All right, let me get out of effects. Curve. This is your curves adjustment. So the curves adjustment layer, that's what you got here. So you have your highlight values at the top of the curve, your shadow values at the bottom of the curve. Somewhere in between, you can add in your dots to kind of adjust for your highlights, your middle tones, and shadows for brightness and contrast. You have dots here that represent your red, your green, and your blue color value that you can adjust even further to get color adjustments with the curves. And again, you're trying to create or recreate your own kind of adjustment, however you wish it to be, to get whatever type of color adjustment you absolutely want. And does this work? Yeah. Does it work well? Subjective. Do you like it? Up to you. But it's something that you can do that you have here. You don't have levels like, I like the levels adjustment better than I do curves adjustment, but curves is here for that tone curve, and it works. It's nice. Color mixer. Another way of doing the exact same thing that I just did, adjusting the hue, saturation, and brightness of each individual channel value, each individual color, or the overall color value of the whole entire, thing. You can divide it out amongst each one of the individual colors for the hue, saturation, and luminance. So you can make this color mixer to whatever you need in order to get the adjusted color value that you're aiming for. And again, it's a matter of you doing your own type of adjustment. And you can do it by hue, saturation, and lightness value, or you could do it by the actual hue, saturation, and luminance, however you want to do it. And it's, I guess for some people, it's kind of fun. This is one that I really don't jump into because it's just complicated. It's just a complicated section. Color grading. This one is kind of fun. For those who work in film, you'll get used to color grading, or if you haven't figured it out yet. The idea of color grading is to mask over top of the picture and give a different value of color to the highlight, the middle tone, and the shadow, which is what these three circles represent, to give a particular coloring effect to the picture. And you could color grade this. You can make different areas of the highlight, middle tone, and shadows lighter, darker, and you're basically giving a mood conveyance, conveyance of a mood, or you're trying to create like specular highlights that wasn't there in the original picture. If you were doing this for film, this color grading would be working. You'd be doing the same type of color grading effect on the film to kind of give that mood or enhancement to the picture. And it works great for scenery with doing this. But you can do it with a person, as you can see, and you can create something that's kind of nice, kind of neat. And this is just the basic color grading that I'm doing here. You can go after each individual middle tone, shadow, and highlights. You can go after just the balance of just the luminance value, which is just the global coloration of this. And even after you've done all the other adjustments, and again, you can combine it together with everything else and get a real interesting thing set up on it. So I'm just resetting each one so you can see each one separately. Detail and under effects, remember the clarity and the texture. Details is kind of just the basic sharpening that you can apply on a picture, and you have the ability to adjust for things like radius, detail value, and then the masking is kind of softening up the effect so it's not so harsh applied, to everything. And again, they put these different options here so that way you have the options. You don't have to use them all. Just showing you that you do have those options in which to attack and go after. Optics. This is something that I'm not familiar totally with. I think what this is doing is just another version of an adjustment where you can either manually or based on the color profile of the image that comes in, where you can adjust for color. It is a color adjustment. I'm just not 100% familiar with it to tell you how good or bad it works. Because it's new to me and I just haven't used it. But it looks like it's just giving you further adjustments to remove, yeah, aberrations and fringe. Looks like that with this section here. Looking at the description right here, trying to find aberrations or fringe elements within the picture, right at the edges. And I'm assuming this is probably more for um, outdoor scenery shots that you'll probably get this little fringing effect. Yeah, that you may get that from certain cameras, um, aberrations and things like that. That's the only thing I can see with that. So that's my best version of an educated guess. Lens blur, this is a new one as well, where you can have a lens blur effect be applied, where you could change like the focal length of, your camera adjustments. I haven't seen this work in the pictures that I've been using because I think that this is something that is um, like something that you do inside your camera and have that captured information from a blur, a focal length change or a zoom effect that you do from far away pictures, and then you can adjust towards that. That's the only thing I can think of, and that's the only reason why it's like nothing is available for me to apply because I'm thinking it's not part of this particular picture um, where it's in there. So calibration is, oh, this was coming from the camera itself. From the version of the camera that you have well, from the camera itself, can have different you can have different, trying to say this right. From the camera that shot this picture, you can have different version controls built into that camera when it comes to color adjustments. So you can adjust the color based on the camera's capability. That's what this is for. So where it says process here, depending on the camera, you may not have every one of these versions like what I'm looking at. And then you may not have um, these red, green, and blue primary and this shadow tint. You may have a different set of controls based on the camera that shows up. So based on this camera, which is a Canon EOS 5D Mark II, you can see that all the way at the very, very top. It'll tell you I have these controls. That's what that calibration is for. Now, again, every one of these controls, do you have to use? No, not at all. Matter of fact, I spend more time under light and the color and maybe the effects than I do with anything else under here. I'll spend more time with these three because when this camera raw filter was initially introduced, these three were available all the time. And a lot of people, when you go in the Lightroom and everything else, these sections are always the same, these three sections. Everything else is kind of subjective. It's there or it's not there, or it's been updated and changed, or it's been added recently, and you may or may not be the most familiar with it. But besides the profiles at the top, I would go with these three sections. So normally what I would do, this is my workflow. I would go up here to the profile and I would pick one of these profiles from the start, whichever one that I decide I want to choose, either going into viewing the profiles and picking one that's there or using one that I've picked before and choose that first. So that'd be the first thing I do. Then I would go into the light, the color, the effects, and I would make further changes. Just make more adjustments to what's already there, what was already created, and kind of add my own little flair to it, whatever that may be. So I can get the picture that I want. And when I'm done, I'll have that picture like I want it to be, and then I'll go from there. And then I'll move forward from there. So that's how I usually do it. I don't go through every last one of these categories because it's kind of unnecessary for me. What do I do next? Well, after I finish going through all of that here on the side, at the bottom is at the very bottom in the middle, there's this text, these words down here. This allows you to say that when I hit this button that says open object over here to the right, this is how it's going to open. So open object means that it's going to open it up in Photoshop as a smart object. The reason for doing that is so when you double click on the smart object, what happens? Whatever you had in that protected file is going to open up. So if I double click on the smart object, it's going to open this camera raw filter again. So I can do further adjustments whenever I feel like it. So that's what open object is for. But in order to get that to happen, you got to click on this text down here at the bottom. And when you click on this text, it opens up this dialog box, which allows you to choose either from some custom presets that you create, because there's nothing up there initially. You have to actually make choices and then save it, save it as your own preset, which is, I've done this before. But you would choose things like the color space, which color profile do you want to use? Pro photo, do you want to make your own thing up? Do you have one of these other output choices? What's the color bit depth is going to be, 8 or 16? I usually opt for the 16 bit depth here. The color space, pro photo is fine for me. If you want to pick something else, like the Adobe RGB or anything like that, you could pick that. That'll be the color mode that it comes through into. If you pick one of the other outputs, like if you pick one of the print outputs, the CMYK, then you'll have a intent, which is the color intent, how it's going to convert the colors over from RGB to CMYK. And do you want to simulate, paper and ink? There is, by choosing the different profiles, there is kind of a shift in color that you'll be able to kind of see, especially when you go from a standard RGB output to a CMYK output. You'll definitely see a difference in the shift of color if you want to pay attention to that. So you can make adjustments to that, so that way it'll be in the right color mode, RGB or CMYK, depending on what you pick, and it'll have the right color profile attached to it. Image sizing. So resizing this to fit a particular size that you need. This is me. You have these different, you could choose this resize to fit option, and then you could pick how you want the resizing to happen. By its longest side, its shortest side, a width and height that you explicitly put in there, dimensions, megapixel value, percentage, what have you. I usually do it by the long side because that's easier. It's just one number, and I can say how big I want it to be. I want it to be an 8x10, so I do, at least closest to an 8x10 as I'm going to get. So I can do by the long side at 10, or I can do the short side at 8, for instance, inches. So that way it's going to get to that size. And the other side is going to proportionally scale. If I do it by a width and height, then I would have to type in the actual width and height, and then that could possibly stretch your picture in a weird way that you may not like. So to avoid that, I'd rather do it by the long or short side. So that way I'm just putting in the one value and the other value just proportionally changes. That works out better for me in my brain with what I work with. And then the resolution. What do you want that resolution to be? Again, you would find out if I'm doing this strictly for the web, okay, 96. 150 if I want to do some HD thing or whatever. Um, but somewhere between 150 and 300 is where my aiming point is for anything with print. So I'm making this 10 inches. Well, it's going 6 by 10. So let me go with the short side because I noticed that when I put that at 8, it went to 8 by 12 because it's a little taller than 8 by 10, but that's cool. So I can do it as an 8 by 10, so 8 by 12. I can cut it down to 8 by 10, and then the resolution at 300. I'm good with that because I want to use this for print. I'm not sure from my printer if the resolution needs to be at this number or lower, but as long as it doesn't have to go over this number, I'm good. Output sharpening. I don't do this, but you could turn this on so that way it sharpens the picture based on an output for print. What are you printing on, glossy paper or matte paper? And what amount of extra sharpening do you want to apply? I usually don't do this because I wait till I get it into Photoshop to do that part, the extra sharpening if I need it. And then this last option here, you always turn this on, open in Photoshop as a smart object. Purpose of that is so as a smart object, if you double click on it, it'll open back into this camera raw because you may need to do some extra color adjustments, or you might need to come back into this window and change any of these settings here. So because you found out that 8 by 10 is not what it needs to be, it needs to be bigger than that or smaller than that. You can change that. Or the resolution needs to be over this 300 number, so you could change that right whenever you need to. So I hit OK. Well, before I hit OK, if I need to save this, I can save this as a preset, and I can save it as one of my other presets by giving the same name, or save it as a new one if I need to, so that way I can come back to this in a totally different file and use this again. I don't want to do that right now, so I'll just hit OK. That will save those settings. It'll be embedded into this camera raw file. So the next camera raw file, next time I open this one, it'll have those settings embedded into it and have all these settings embedded into it. So that way I don't have to come back to this anymore. And then comes the open object. Now, if I hit done, then it just closes the interface. It never opens that camera raw file. It just puts in these settings. The next time I open the camera raw file, it'll have all these settings and everything in place. If I hit open object, it saves all those settings and then opens the object up into Photoshop. May have to give it a little bit of a little moment, but it'll go ahead and open it up. And then, of course, this message will pop up because I'm using a different profile than what my working profile is. So I want to use the embedded profile here, that first radio button. Hit OK. That way it opens up in my Photoshop now. So that camera raw filter is actually outside of Photoshop, but in order to get it, you have to have Photoshop open in order for the camera raw filter to apply. So if you don't have Photoshop open at the time you try to open your DNG files or your camera raw files, if it's going to tell it to open up Photoshop and then open up the camera raw filter. Once I have it, now I have my picture. If I go to image and image size, I'll see all of the width and the height. If I change this to inches instead of percentage, see 8 by 12, 300 pixel per inch. So that was done right. If I look at my layers palette here, the name of the file was called High Pass 2. So that's the name of the layer. And then it has the little icon there to show that it's a protected layer. I double click on that. It's going to open up the camera raw filter. So I can go back into this camera raw filter. I can make further adjustments as I need to, maybe change this amount because why not? Let's make her closer to purple. And if I want to go down here to change any of the information here, let's say I find out that this is going to be printed at 230 instead of at the 300. So I can drop that down to 230, hit OK. And then I hit OK to get out of this dialog box. And once I do that, it's going to reapply everything. See, she's a little more towards the purple range now. And if I go to image size, look at that. It did not change the resolution. Still came to the 8 by 12, but did not update the resolution to the 230. That's a bug because that happened before. Last time I did this that showcased that, it has been a few months. I know there's been some more updates that's happened, but that happened before. Yeah, that did happen before. Where I could change the resolution, physical size, that's that information that's in that dialog box. I could change that information, and once I change it and hit OK to get out of everything, it should have updated all that, and it did not. So I don't know why it stopped doing that. Maybe they turned that off. Maybe they did something that ended up turning it off and they don't know yet. So maybe in next update it'll fix that. I don't know. But those are things you can kind of change on your own outside of that interface. But the main thing is just the color adjustment that you can do. Let's see. I think that's it with this. So that's the camera raw filter. All right. Everything from this point is just you doing regular Photoshop stuff. Now, the last thing I want to show you before I close out with this camera raw filter is some people have asked, can I use this camera raw filter on something that is not a raw file or not a DNG file? Short answer is yes. I could take any picture, right? Photo like this. I normally don't do this. Remember, I always thought I normally don't right click and convert to a smart object. Usually what I do is duplicate the layer. I'm just going to call it raw filter, then right click on it and convert it to a smart object. So you could take the background layer and do that if you wanted to. I just don't. That's just my preference. I always duplicate the layer and then convert it to a smart object. I don't take the background layer and convert it just immediately to a smart object. But once you have that layer as a smart object under your filter menu, you have camera raw filter here. It opens up the camera raw filter. It allows you to apply the same color setting adjustments that we were doing by, picking a profile, choosing the amount you want to apply that profile to of. You can adjust other elements like, temperature and contrast and highlights, the whites and the shadows and the blacks. So as you see, you can make as many adjustments as you want to. Temperature and tint, vibrance and saturation. Again, that's something that I just like to do. Just for some reason, just has a different look to it. Than, see, that's before, that's after. I don't know why. I just like that. And I can start playing with things like the exposure level and the contrast more once I do that. And I just like it. It's just me. I'm a weirdo, but count me as that. Anyway, I can make these different adjustments, get this to look the way I want it to, even play with this texture and clarity to get a little HDR elements going on with it. The dehazing doesn't do anything. It really just makes it look extra terrible. So usually can't do anything with the dehaze on a regular photo. I can vignette it a little bit. That's always kind of cool looking. Give that vignetting kind of effect. With the midpoint and the roundness value of it, so it's not so standard looking. When you do the darken side of it, you can change the highlighting so that way it's not so dark around the edges. Something that's easy played with. And I always like to add a little grain to the image. Usually what I do is I turn the grain all the way up so I can see the actual grain, so I can play with the size as well as the roughness value of it. And then I'll turn the grain value down so it's not so harsh. Just that little bit of a graininess kind of brings some character out in the picture. All right. And do any of the other things that I want to do. And when I finish, of course, you hit OK. It is now that protected layer has this applied to it. And see, that's before, that's after. You know, subtle, nothing too rough, but this is what I get. All right, my music is playing, which means it's time for me to go. For now, this is all the camera raw information I wanted to show you. I'm gonna break now, and I'm gonna come back with a different video, and I'm gonna show you the HDR elements. So, thank you. I will talk to you on another later date. See you later.